So, Showdown Bandit. This game just kind of came out of literally nowhere. You see, Showdown Bandit was actually scheduled to come out last month, but was unfortunately delayed, and while I don't remember 100% the reason why, if they did give a reason, it was delayed for about a month, and then at one point they just said, hey, game's coming out next week, and we were like, oh, that's cool, and then they just dropped the game. Without even announcing it, without any sort of build up or anything. They were just like, bam, episode 1, it's out, go buy it and play it. And I'm not gonna lie, I like this game like a lot, and I like it a lot more than I thought I was going to. But the game does have its flaws, unfortunately, as every game does, and here today I'm just kind of here to do a bit of a first impressions video. Keep in mind that this is 100% unscripted, so anything I say is just kind of popping out of my head. So if I forget to say anything, I may say it in a future video. We'll just have to see. Okay, so I think we should start off with the topic of I was actually, you know what, I was kind of initially worried about this game, and the fact that I was a bit worried that it was gonna be a little too similar to Bending the Ink Machine, because from what we had seen, it looked a little similar to it, just the overall, like, kind of presentation that we saw throughout the trailers and whatnot. I was initially worried that this game would lean a little too close to Bendy and, like, wouldn't be able to stand on its own 2 feet, but after playing this game for a little while, I had realized that I could not have been more wrong. While this game isn't 100% different from Bending the Ink Machine, as there are a few things in it that you can definitely tell that, you know, it's by the same people, it is still quite different in the long run. And one of the ways that this is the case is the gameplay. It's no longer this first-person kind of immersive gameplay like Bending the Ink Machine. It's a point-and-click, like, you know how those virtual worlds from, like, way back would have those point-and-click things where you would point to a part of the screen and you would click it, and then your avatar or whatever, like, would walk to that area. Well, that's what Showdown Bandit plays like. And I'm not sure if there are any other games that played like that. It's just really the only kinds that I played that had that similar gameplay. So it was kind of cool to see this kind of point-and-click gameplay from virtual worlds turned into this unique horror experience. But even that is not without its flaws, as it all kind of comes down to the speed of things. I do know that while episode 1 didn't have a ton of trial and error segments in it, it did have a few, and walking to the same area over and over was a bit of a slog, just because there is no other speed. There is one set speed. You click somewhere and you will walk there. You can't go any faster or any slower, for that matter. I'm not sure why you'd want to go any slower, but you can't go faster or slower, and it can just make things a bit of a slog. And that's kind of the same thing with the enemy encounters, is that when you're being chased, it feels a lot less tense unless you're, like, taking a corner or you're really close to an enemy and you're like, oh, I don't know if it's gonna hit me. But it doesn't, the chases don't really feel all that tense because, you know, you can't go any faster. It's not like you can start running and then the enemy starts running too. You're both just stuck at the same speed. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure the enemies don't go any faster when they see you. I'm pretty sure they remain at their same speed, which is honestly not that threatening. Now, I will say that it's not just the gameplay speed, or like the speed of the gameplay that you're moving around. That's not 100% the reason the game isn't super scary or tense. It's just kind of to be expected from top-down horror games like Yo Mowai Night Alone. You guys remember I did a Let's Play on that series that was eventually canceled, but I did do some of it nonetheless, and it had a very similar, you know, top-down perspective view, and a lot of points in that game, the chases just weren't that scary because it was a top-down view. You know, that's just to be expected from horror games that have a top-down view. So keep in mind, it's not 100% this game in particular's fault with the speed and everything. It's just, you know, the fact that it's top down, it's not as immersive as a first person game, so you know, that's just to be expected. Oh, and one thing that I found really interesting is that I think they tried to make this game a little scarier by having jump scare animations when you get killed, but they're delayed by like a whole second, maybe even more, like maybe a second and a half after you get killed. So it's not like instant like that. And plus, most enemies, I'm pretty sure there's only one enemy in the game so far that is a one-hit kill. Every other enemy, I'm pretty sure only like takes one or two of your strings down at once. So like if you have one string, you're probably gonna remember that being like your, you know, oh, my life's on its last thread, and then when you get killed by an enemy and it just takes that whole second and a half of the jump scare animation to play, you're just like, oh, okay, that was kind of weird. And it just kind of feels anticlimactic, you know. And I do think that if the jump scare had you know, happened as soon as you get killed, it would have made it a little scarier. But even then, like I said, you're probably gonna remember if you only have one string left. So even then, it still wouldn't be that much scarier. And honestly, the jump scare animations just feel kind of unnecessary. Like, there's this one enemy that looks kind of like you. I think he's known as the Faceless Bandit. One thing I noticed about his design is that he doesn't have any strings attached to him, which is kind of interesting. That could tie into the lore in some way. So I can maybe understand a special jump scare animation for him in particular, because like he has no strings, and you know, he's like this one-hit kill enemy and everything. And so like, yeah, I can understand, give him a jump scare animation, but for like every single enemy in the game, it just kind of felt unnecessary, especially considering Bendy and the Ink Machine didn't have any jump scares for any of the enemies when you get killed. It's just like you get killed, your screen blacks out, you walk through the little like inky tunnel thing to get to the portal at the end, and then bam, you're back at a checkpoint or whatever. Speaking of checkpoints, this game actually has a save system, unlike Bendy and the Ink Machine. Or Bendy and the Ink Machine kind of had a save system where you could find these like one of those punch-in things, one of the older, you know, like from the 30s, things that you would use to like clock into work or something, and you could save through there. But most of the time in Bendy and the Ink Machine, your game just kind of auto-saved and would throw you back to the nearest checkpoint. But this game, there's actually a few different save places. Like there's just a couple different places that you can save through the banker, who is actually a character in this game. And I actually kind of like the banker's personality. He wasn't at all like what I expected. I kind of expected him to be a bit more aggressive, but surprisingly, he's very timid sounding, which I thought was kind of interesting, which we'll get to like character development or like, you know, characters' personalities a little later. But there is only a few different save places in this game, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I do think it overall makes it feel more like a actual survival horror game. To have only a few different places where you can save instead of just being able to save just whenever you want, or the game just automatically saving after you do something. I really do like that. Another thing that actually makes this game feel a bit more like a survival horror game is the bear traps mechanic that's introduced. I want to say a little bit less than halfway into the chapter, where you can grab these bear traps and place them down for enemies to step in and just, you know, kind of die. And while you can just go to like the area where the banker and Doc Carver are, Doc Carver's another character, by the way. We'll talk more about that later, but like you can just kind of go to one of those areas and get more bear traps if you run out. But sometimes you're in an area that's kind of far away from one of those, so you kind of have to decide whether you want to try to run from an enemy or if you want to try and place a bear trap down and get rid of it right then and there. And it adds an element of decision making, which is what a lot of survival horror games like maybe Resident Evil 7 and Alien Isolation do, and it was really cool to see that implemented into this game, and I really like how it was done. Now, I do think that the bear traps should be a bit more scarce, like maybe spread throughout the map, and like they wouldn't respawn until like maybe, I don't know, maybe give it a certain time limit before they respawn. Or maybe after you die or something like that. That's just the one thing about it that I don't like too much, but other than that, it's a great mechanic. Now let's talk about the characters and their personalities real quick. First of all, the Showdown Bandit himself that you play as, he doesn't really talk at all. Like, you don't really hear his voice whatsoever in the game, you know, except like outside of the trailers, and there's this room with their TV where you can hear a small clip of his voice. But other than that, you just kind of hear him, you know, let out a bit of a yell at the beginning of the first episode, and that's about it. You don't really hear his voice. We don't really know anything about his personality, which, like, honestly, that's the thing about a lot of survival horror games, is just them not giving the character you play as much personality whatsoever. So that's not just a thing in this game. It's a thing in a lot of different survival horror games, but I think it's a lot more prominent in this one. I do think he should have at least a few lines of dialogue. Hopefully, maybe he'll start to speak up a bit more in the later episodes. We'll just have to see. But like I said, the banker, he has a much different personality than what I expected him. I expected him to be like a bit more aggressive, but he actually sounds pretty timid and worried a lot of the times. Then you have Doc Carver, which he has the personality that I pretty much expected him to. I don't really know how to describe him. He's just one of those stereotypical Western type characters, and I think the banker is kind of like that in a way too, but I think that was intentionally done. So it's all good in my opinion anyways. There was this other character, I think her name was Sally or something like that, but she gets introduced and she's like, oh, I found out the way, you know, just take out your eyes and you can't look up, which I think, like, not looking up is one of, like, the heavy things in this game's kind of like, you know, how Bendy and the Ink Machine, like, one of the biggest things or rules was, like, you know, beware the ink demon, and now, like, in this game it's like, don't look up. And I think the reason they're saying don't look up is because then you'll see who's controlling the strings, which I think even the banker kind of mentions that at one point. He says something like, do you ever wonder what our strings are attached to up there? So I think kind of the rules of this world is don't look up or you'll see who's controlling the strings or something like that. So this character basically takes out her eyes. But we don't really know anything about her outside of the fact that she took out her eyes so that she can't see anything, like she can't look up, which kind of makes me wonder if she can see at all, honestly. I know the banker also doesn't have any eyes, but I think even in the posters he doesn't have any visible eyes, so I think he's just kind of always been like that. I don't think he took out his eyes as well. I think he's just always been like that. Now real quick, I do want to talk about this game's presentation as well. Believe it or not, this game's presentation actually kind of reminded me of, I think, Paper Mario, was it Sticker Star or Color Splash? How it kind of had, everything kind of had this crafty feel to it, but it only reminded me of it a little because, you know, it's like, because that game was a lot more about, like, crafts and stuff like that, and this game is, like, about, you know, like, the set pieces that they would use for, like, a puppet show, like, a long time ago on TV or something like that, which reminds me a lot of Toy Story 2, honestly, because that's just where I kind of first saw that whole thing with, like, puppets on an old TV show and stuff like that. I think a lot of people actually said it reminded them of Toy Story 2. But one thing I really like about this game's presentation is how whenever you enter a room, like, all the set pieces go up and then new ones come down. And while I didn't like it very much at first, it actually grew on me and I came to like it a lot, and it adds a lot of charm to the overall presentation of the game. And by the way, this game looks very visually different from Bendy and the Ink Machine. Like, there were only a few things in this game that I was kind of like, oh, that kind of looks like Bendy and the Ink Machine. But other than that, it was incredibly visually different. And actually kind of reminded me of Hello Neighbor, sort of, which I don't really like to admit because that game looked a bit too cartoony for my liking, but it did kind of remind me of Hello Neighbor in a way. Not too much, just a little. But I think the overall presentation of the game is really, really good, and I think if they maybe introduce more things later down the line, like maybe some characters that are just little cardboard cutout set pieces or like paper cutout set pieces or something like that, that would be really cool. But you know, there is more things that could be added into the presentation that I would like to see, but overall right now it's really good. Now, I will say this, I think the puppet characters, some of the characters move a little bit too lifelike to seem like puppets. Like, you're supposed to get this whole, impression, I guess, that, like, all the characters are being pulled by strings or something, but some of them move a little too lifelike for my liking to make it seem like they're actually being pulled by strings. I'm not saying that this is throughout the entire game, but some of the characters just kind of, they move a little too fluidly for my liking. Believe it or not, it actually kind of reminds me of, weird comparison, I don't know, but it reminds me of, like, the trailer for the Playmobil movie, where everything moves a little too fluidly to feel like Playmobil figures, which is something that the Lego movie nailed perfectly. Like, nothing moved as if it wasn't a Lego. Everything felt like it was a Lego. But in the, the Playmobil movie, it didn't really feel like that. It felt like the animations were a little too fluid to really feel like that they were, a part of like a Playmobil world. I almost said Lego Playmobil for some reason. Like I said, weird comparison, I know, but it's just kind of what I thought. Oh, and the amount of content in episode 1 really did surprise me, because it kind of took me a little while to forget that, Bendy and the Ink Machine was the Meatly's first attempt at creating a game. So, of course, the first chapter wasn't going to have that much content in it. But, like, this game had, like, I want to say 70 plus people working on it. So the amount of content in the first chapter is incredible. And at first I was like, oh, I wonder why they're charging for the first... Did I say first chapter? I meant to say first episode. And at first I was kind of like, I wonder why they're charging for the first episode, because you would think that they would make it free. And then I played through the demo version of the game, because the Steam release was taking a little while to come out, because Steam was taking a little while to approve of it. And I was playing through the demo, and I was initially worried about paying $8 for the rest of the first chapter, because I was kind of like, what if it doesn't go that much farther past the, like, where the demo ended? But surprisingly it did. I got a whole lot more gameplay out of it. But I do want to say this, if you want to make it feel more like your money is well spent, I say don't play the demo, just pay for the first episode and play all the way through. It will make you feel like you got your money's worth even more. Now, I will say this, I'm glad they didn't really, like, make one half of the episode be in the demo and then the other half locked behind an $8 paywall, because that I would not have felt like I'd gotten my money's worth had they done that, because like, doesn't that seem kind of ridiculous to play the same amount of time of something and then play the same amount of time for something in the game, but for $8 instead? That would seem kind of but surprisingly, I think maybe only a bit over 1/4 of the first episode was in the demo. I want to say maybe 1.5/4 of the first episode was in the demo, which I really do like, because, once again, the first episode's $8, and I didn't want to feel like that I had gotten kind of, cheated. I was actually initially worried that it was only going to go like 20 minutes past the demo, what the demo did, and I was going to be like, oh, this was a waste of money. I should have just waited till the second episode came out, whatever. But I didn't feel that way at all. I think they did a really good job at what they had put, like, the amount of stuff that they had put in the demo, and then, left the rest for people who were gonna pay for it. Also, just to kind of wrap things up, this game has a really good soundtrack so far. I don't think the soundtrack has been uploaded anywhere on YouTube as of now, because I think people are still trying to kind of rip the files from the game in order to upload their music. But I did actually post the title theme music of this game on my YouTube channel, because I was just kind of gonna do it for myself, but then I was like, you know what, since I'm doing this, I might as well, let everyone else enjoy it, since it's not really out on YouTube anywhere else right now. So you can check that out at the end of the video in the link in the description or something like that. I'll probably put an end card, or I'll put the link in the description or something. Maybe an iCard in the top right corner. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, that's it for my first impressions of Showdown Bandit. Overall, the game looks to be very promising so far, and apparently they're going to keep expanding the first chapter as they, kind of progress through game development, which I think is something that they did with Bendy and the Ink Machine 2, where every single time a chapter released, there was an update to the previous chapters to add new rooms or better lighting or whatever. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for my first impressions of Showdown Bandit. Like I said, looks to be a very promising game, and I really hope they continue to do great things with the coming episodes of this game. And hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Good lord, I stuttered so much in this video.